Wolfclock Productions, Wolfclock here. Valve's upcoming game, Deadlock, has had a very intricate and strange development. First beginning development way back in 2018, according to the final hours of Half-Life Alyx, the game underwent a major art and story redesign around the summer of 2023, going from the future space cyberpunk-styled game known as Neon Prime to an early 20th century alternate history Earth, where magic was suddenly thrust into it during the mid-1800s. I could talk about the uniqueness of the setting for days, and, well, maybe I will. But today, I'd like to go into the specifics of a few particular characters in this world, and the dynamics between them. While the reason that the game got its redesign is likely because of a general feeling of genericness to the currently oversaturated cyberpunk style, Neon Prime also had a significant amount of lore to it. So much so that it even included a dedicated button on the main menu that would drop pages upon pages of world lore to the player, and many of the voice lines of characters that existed during this time also complemented the lore by commenting on current happenings in the world of Fracture. And since voice actors aren't always the most free and lenient of contract workers to get a hold of, many voice lines in earlier updates to Deadlock still reference old lore. Now, this would usually be the part of these videos where I do my betafied intro and dive into the old lore of Neon Prime, but today's video is all about surprises, and the first surprise I'm going to give you all today is that we are not doing that. A big shocker for the two viewers who've seen my other videos but somehow didn't read the title of this one, I know. No. Today, we're going to take a look at some of the new lore of Deadlock that the developers have been slowly drip-feeding us over the course of months as the game has been expanding. Today, we're going to talk about Seven and Kelvin, and I'm going to propose a few theories, some that are pretty obvious, and some that you may have not considered up to this point. So strap in, get yourself a nice drink, and enjoy. To start things off, if you haven't gotten access to Deadlock's closed alpha, or haven't read the character backgrounds, you may not know a whole lot about who Seven is. Well, to paraphrase from his Fate's Tale, which, by the way, is the longest one at the moment, Seven is essentially a mystic anarchist. A mystic anarchist who was very unhappy about the idea that governments of the world were limiting and placing restrictions on the use of magic. And while we don't know what it is exactly that he did, we know that Seven did something so horrible that he was not only arrested and thrown into Lost Whisper, an oubliette designed for the most dangerous of occultists, but was also given the death sentence to be carried out through the use of a magic electrical chair that would not only kill him, but destroy his soul so that he could never be resurrected or contacted. Furthermore, the most powerful ritualists of 7 different nations placed wards on him to ensure that there would be zero chance of failure during his execution. Naturally, despite the magical electric chair, the 7 most powerful government-employed ritualists placing wards on him, and the years of torture and solitude weakening his body, Seven inverted the chair's eldritch electricity, killing all of his captors and infusing the chair to his body in the process. In the time since his escape from Lost Whisper, Seven, who got his name from the wards that failed to stop him, has been in hiding in New York, preparing for the Maelstrom, where he intends to summon the Patron and receive a wish that, while we don't know the exact details of yet, will undoubtedly involve in bringing him closer to godhood. So that's Seven's background. He yearns for the freedom of all things mystical, he's hiding from the government, he intends to make himself a god, and he hates Kelvin. Wait, what? So Seven really hates Kelvin, and Kelvin has no idea why. In fact, Kelvin has no idea who Seven even is.
That man hates me, and he barely knows me.
Kelvin is a famous explorer and scientist who, a year and a half before the events of Deadlock, went missing during an ill-fated expedition to the Arctic in search of a potential 8th astral gate. Upon his body being located inside a chunk of ice, clutching a glowing rock, Kelvin is revealed to have become an unwitting revenant, inexplicably still alive despite no pulse and no bleeding. He's also, somewhat conveniently, lost all memory of the expedition, and is seeking to summon the Patron in order to learn what happened. And yeah, Seven really hates him.
You got what you deserved, Kelvin. It was always going to come down to you and me, Kelvin. His ego is almost as big as Kelvin's. They killed Kelvin. Someone's getting a fruit basket later.
Those were just some of the many lines that Seven has for Kelvin. Valve has written 7 to hate Kelvin so much that he has completely unique voice lines that will only play in situations involving Kelvin, such as when Kelvin, and Kelvin alone, escapes from 7's ultimate.
Kelvin, you can't run from me forever!
I really want to make sure it's understood. There are no other lines like that for any other character. 7 will only comment if Kelvin survives his storm. Despite Kelvin not knowing who 7 is, 7 has a lot of lines that suggest that him and Kelvin knew each other a long time ago. If Kelvin uses a healing ability on 7, 7 will remark with familiarity to the situation.
What game are you playing at, Kelvin? Like old times, eh, Kelvin? Don't think this buys my loyalty.
Furthermore, we also know that the 7 of the past, before he became whatever it is you'd like to call him now, placed Kelvin in a position of high regard. When we listen to one of the conversations that 7 and Kelvin can have together at the start of a match, we hear him say this.
No barbed words before the ritual?
Kelvin, whatever it is you are now is a pale imitation of the man you were. To mock someone in your state of frailty is beneath me.
So here's what we know. 1. 7 really, really hates Kelvin now. 2. Kelvin has no idea who 7 is. 3. Despite his deep hatred for Kelvin, 7 used to hold him in high regards. 4. 7 and Kelvin used to journey together. 5. 7 couldn't have been a part, or even related to, Kelvin's expedition to the Arctic, as he was either in prison or on the run a year and a half before the events of the game. And finally, 6. 7, much like Kelvin, is also a researcher in the realm of the occult. Oh, did I fail to mention that part? Seven knows a lot about the occult and magic. I mean a lot. He always talks as if he knows more than he lets on, and he tends to be able to back this up with mentions of things that most people aren't aware of as well. If 7 passes by Lady Geist on a zipline, he will refer not to Lady Geist herself, but to the ancient spirit Oathkeeper, who's attached to her arm.
Oathkeeper?
7 and Abrams have multiple game start conversations, where 7 alludes to knowing about the tome that Abram carries around. A tome that, mind you, not even Abrams knows much of anything about.
Detective Abrams?
I don't believe we've met.
Oh, we haven't. But I'm fascinated by what you hold.
If you think I'm letting you get your hands on my...
Oh, don't worry, Detective. I know better. That tome is pulling you into deep waters, Detective. Be careful.
Don't know if I need life advice from somebody who was caught and executed.
Yet here I stand. Perhaps you should consider that I know what I'm talking about.
In a currently unfinished conversation with Professor Dynamo, 7 confides in Dynamo that his research into astral gates was inspirational for him and led to his own research of the occult.
Your research into the astral gates paved the way for my own. In my rare moments of doubt, sometimes I even wonder if I would have become the man I am were it not for you.
Now, this next bit of information comes from one of the currently unfinished visual novels, which I can understand if you don't want to hear about before said novel is complete and available. So if you don't want spoilers, skip ahead to this timestamp. Good? Okay, good. In Holiday's visual novel, where she's hunting a serial killer known as the Troubadour who murdered her family and friends before moving to New York, she receives information from her journalist friend Allie that someone knows where the Troubadour is hiding. Upon meeting with this someone, it's revealed that Allie's source is none other than 7, whom Allie knows because she's writing a story about him. Somehow, despite being in hiding in New York, 7 came to learn about the Troubadour, whose magic abilities include being able to turn to a murder of crows, and for reasons that we don't know yet, chooses to help Holiday take care of him. So, as we can see, 7 isn't just a fanatic who thinks that all powerful magic wielders should rule over others. He's actually a highly researched, informed, and overall intelligent man who seems to come from a scientific or academic background prior to him forming his anarchic beliefs and committing public atrocities that landed him with the ultimate spirit death penalty. So who is 7 really? He's another researcher or scientist who knew and respected Kelvin before becoming 7, who, despite all that, hates him now, as if he was betrayed or led astray by Kelvin. He's someone who... He's Edric, Kelvin's old best friend. Yeah, if you're watching this video and have already been paying attention to the game's lore, you already knew this and have probably already begun drafting a comment to lambaste me for acting as if this was big news. Fair enough. However, I suggest you look at how much time there is left in this video and realize I've got just a little bit more than stating basic information prepared here, and hold off for just a few more minutes, because this isn't just a 7 video, no. This is a 7 and Kelvin video. Now with that being said, if you don't know the game's lore already, you might be wondering who the hell Edric is. Well, to put in simple terms, Edric is one of Kelvin's old friends. At some point, he and Kelvin had a rather fiery falling out, resulting in Kelvin fully believing that Edric will at some point try, and possibly even succeed, in killing him.
If someone's going to kill me, it's going to be Edric, not you.
Despite that teeny tiny little bombshell line about Edric, Kelvin usually refers to him in high regards, as we can hear here.
If only Edric could see me now.
It seems very strange that, despite his usually chipper and friendly demeanor, Kelvin seems to fully expect this former friend of his to come gunning for him at some point, and he seems almost entertained by the idea, as if whatever he did, he doesn't regret, as if he feels like this former friend of his isn't a real concern to worry about. I also want to point out that, despite this, Kelvin also sought out Edric after reviving in the Arctic, according to his half of this conversation with Lady Geist.
Edric? I don't know. I tried to find him when I returned to New York, but it's like he's vanished. I wish I could share that sentiment.
I'm not a betting man, but I have a hunch that this last line here is in response to Geist telling him that she's sure he'll be able to find Edric, or that Edric will be happy to see him, or something like that. And once we get this full conversation, I suspect that it'll be yet another piece of evidence about Edric wanting to kill Kelvin. Finally, for this section, I want to highlight a particular conversation that Seven and Kelvin have, and compare it to an earlier line from Kelvin. Take a listen.
Don't worry, Kelvin, I won't let you die.
I thought you hated me.
I do, but if anyone is going to kill you, it's going to be me.
Those words sound a bit familiar, don't they? Well, let's take a listen to Kelvin's revenge kill line again.
If someone's going to kill me, it's going to be Edric, not you.
I don't think I need to point out the pretty obvious parallel there. Seven is Kelvin's old friend Edric. Case closed. Except, case not closed. Case wide open, in fact. Why does Edric want to kill Kelvin? Why does Kelvin know that Edric wants to kill him? Why is Kelvin the last person here who's able to figure out Seven's identity? Put your thinking caps on, folks, because we are about to go on a journey. Deadlock has a lot of interesting character dynamics. Something noteworthy about the playable cast is that most of them are neither upstanding citizens nor downright monsters, but most of them are criminals. We have characters who act good and are good, like Pocket, Dynamo, and Viscous. These characters generally don't want to hurt anybody and are doing what they're doing for perfectly morally acceptable reasons, if not objectively good ones. Pocket just doesn't want their father to kill them. Dynamo just wants his human body back so he can spend the remainder of his life normally with his wife. Viscous is arguably one of the more objectively moral characters on the roster, as the whole reason why he's trying to summon the patron is to banish the adversary from the deep and save the ocean. Next up, we have characters who act evil and are evil. You know, characters like Seven, who wants to summon the patron for purely selfish reasons at the expense of the rest of the world. Characters like Fathom, real name Slork, who also wants to banish the adversary from the deep, but only because he sees the adversary as competition and wants to be the most feared denizen of the deep. Characters like Yamato, who, if you translate some of her lines, makes her sound worse than Seven is. And now we get into the real meat of things. Some characters on the roster act evil, but are more so putting on an act. Bebop is a notable instance of this type of character. A scrap golem created by Miss Shelley Fisher, Bebop is brash, rude, awful to play against in my experience, and participates in blood sports for money. One would assume from a description like this that he's pretty awful. However, the reason why he participates in the bear pit is because he needs the money to pay for Miss Shelley's cancer treatment. Well, nondescript unnamed illness treatment, but, you know, it's cancer. He's paying for a cancer treatment. Now we've got another type of character alignment here. The kind of character that acts nice, but is actually secretly awful. Characters like this tend to be in places of power, authority, or, most importantly here, fame. Omni-Man, Homelander, characters like that fit this description. Now, you already know where I'm going with this, but pretend like you don't so I can build up to it, and let's think about this for a minute here. What character in Deadlock's cast is famous?
Miss Shelley loved reading about your adventures.
Which hero that you can play as calls everyone friend to their face, to the point that the word loses its meaning with him?
Well done, my friend.
Which character talks so highly of someone,
If only Edric could see me now.
but also harbors a dark, secretive past with them, and knows that they'd be out to get him if they could?
If someone's going to kill me, it's going to be Edric, not you.
Which character starts dropping the act the moment he gets a leg up over the enemy?
Don't feel bad, my friend. No one is better than me.
Which character is so full of himself that when no one's left around to hear it, he starts gloating about how good he is?
If you were going to lose, at least you lost to the best, yes? It's not your fault you're not better than me. It just is what it is.
Most importantly, which character out of the entire cast is quoted as having rushed to put together an exploration team in the Arctic instead of taking his time to make sure that they were ready? And who was the only person to survive that journey? You know what the difference is between Seven and Kelvin? The biggest difference, above all else, is that Seven doesn't hide his evil nature from anyone. I believe that Kelvin doesn't know what happened in the Arctic. What I don't believe, though, is that he doesn't know what he would have done. I think Kelvin knows that whatever happened there was his fault, and while he doesn't know the exact details, he's feigning his ignorance. We're expected to believe that one of the most forefront researchers of the occult on Earth, a man who prides himself on his research to the point of delusion, isn't able to figure out that, if he's the only member of the expedition who was found holding a rune-covered rock that kept him alive, it means that he probably took it for himself, at the expense of the rest of his crew. When Kelvin and Krill speak, Krill says,
"Respect and certain death have a way of binding people together, don't they?"
to which Kelvin responds,
Yes. Yes, they do.
in a way that sounds mournful, regretful even, as if he had a friendship built from the same things and blew it all up. Why is it exactly that Kelvin knows that Edric hates him and would want to kill him if he could, but doesn't know why Seven hates him and wants to kill him? Why is it that he just cannot believe the idea that Seven and Edric could be one and the same? The only reason I can think is that the Edric that Kelvin left in New York was someone he could never see gaining the power that Seven has. Perhaps whatever Kelvin did to Edric that filled him with such hatred that he intends to kill him is a prelude to whatever Edric did to become Seven. Perhaps when Kelvin sounded so regretful when speaking with Krill is because when faced with certain death, he chose the selfish option, leaving others for dead. Here's what I think happened. Years ago, Kelvin and Edric were two of the top researchers of Earth, studying the occult and the astral gates. After years of working together as friends, the two went on an expedition somewhere that had fatal consequences. If there was anyone else in the expedition with them, they were long gone by the end of it, and whatever it was that happened, Edric was left permanently disfigured or disabled as a result of Kelvin's actions. This would explain why Kelvin was so mournful when Krill spoke to him about his camaraderie with Maurice. Even if Kelvin has no memory of the events that took place in the Arctic, he knows deep down that if he's the only one who survived, it's because he sacrificed the rest of the crew to save himself. This would also explain why Kelvin expects that Edric wants to kill him. Why Kelvin refuses to accept that someone as powerful as Seven could be the same man as the weak little Edric that he left in New York after their last expedition together, and even why Edric became Seven in the first place. Like I mentioned earlier on, Seven is a master of all things mystical. He knows about Oathkeeper. He knows about the Tome. He believes in mystic supremacy and believes in a world where magic is not bound by rules. While Seven appreciates Dynamo's research, he has no respect for him attempting to return to a human form.
I don't understand you, Professor. You've been bestowed a great gift, and you're willing to throw it all away for nothing.
Likewise, he finds that Infernus shedding his criminal past and becoming a bartender is abhorrent.
All your power and you waste it as a bartender?
By comparison, however, Seven finds Ivy's outlook on life to be admirable, despite their more superficial differences of him being a deranged megalomaniac with a god complex.
I respect you, Ivy.
I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
I mean it. You saw the world as it was and decided it was not acceptable to you. That's to be commended.
So, let's tie this all back to what happened between Edric and Kelvin. Kelvin sacrifices everyone else on his last expedition with Edric, and leaves Edric in New York in a state where he is unable to exact revenge against Kelvin for his ego. Edric, being a fellow researcher of the occult, looks to mysticism as a means of returning his strength. Perhaps it started with something simple, like Edric using rituals to heal himself, perhaps out of paralysis. As he heals himself, he begins to get a taste of the true power that could be unlocked through the mystic arts, if not for the governments of the world putting laws in place that limit the kinds of magic that can be practiced. As Edric scours the world on his own, he begins to see and learn of magic that he's never even considered being able to wield before. He learns of the Tome, he learns of Oathkeeper, he learns of all manners of magic that the government has hidden from the people, until finally, he's garnered enough knowledge and power to make himself known. I don't have a particularly satisfying theory on what it was he did to land in Lost Whisper, although I will point out that when Abrams asks, he responds with,
I offended small-minded simpletons with fragile egos. Your naivete is refreshing, Detective.
And when Infernus pointed out that the OSIC caught Seven before, he responds sarcastically with,
I'm sure they did.
Suggesting that being captured and sent to Lost Whisper was an intentional move on his part, either with the hope of learning from other inmates, in hopes of being executed so that he could turn the tables on his captors and become the Seven that we see in-game, or possibly even a mixture of both. In either case, when Kelvin was thawed out, he was surprised to find that the Edric that he left in New York was gone. I wouldn't be surprised if someone moved after several years, unless the last time I saw said someone, they were physically unable to move from where they were. Hence my theory on Edric's condition. Before I wrap things up, I wanted to mention some bits of lore and fun facts that didn't exactly fit into other sections of the video. Let's go through them. First off, Seven's knowledge. Although he's aware of the Tome and Oathkeeper, Seven's conversation with Viscus suggests that he's actually unaware of what's been going on in the deep, due to him sounding surprised over Viscus's story. This suggests that the ocean isn't an area that he learned about during his travels.
So, you say you're from the deep?
Oh yes.
And why are you here?
The adversary. He comes for the deep. And if I don't stop him, he'll come for everything.
There's more to you than I expected, Viscus.
This may be coincidental, but there are a few conversations that both Kelvin and Seven have with Paradox that might be connected, where Seven inquires if Paradox takes commissions.
Does Paradox take commissions?
And Paradox admits to Kelvin that another member of the Thieves Guild may already be in his home stealing something from him.
Who's to say? We definitely planned on robbing you during the ritual, but my colleague may or may not have broken into your home yet.
Despite most characters believing in his cheerful demeanor, Great Talon also appears to have some dislike of Kelvin.
There is no mercy for you today, Kelvin.
In addition to this, Shiv also has some sharper words for Kelvin, suggesting that maybe all of the Baxter Society may have some disdain for him.
Ah, Kelvin, so noble, so predictable. Guess the rumors about Kelvin being a tough guy are unfounded.
That's about everything that I have here for Seven and Kelvin, but if there's anything that you think I missed, feel free to mention in the comments below. Hopefully, this video won't age horribly, but as we all know, everything is subject to change, considering that happened once before already. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoy this kind of theory crafting video, and would like to see more like this, please let me know. As always, I have been Wolfclock. I will see you all in the next video whenever it may be, and thank you for watching.